Hey, aloha, love tribe. Welcome to part two of the doubleheader of Thankful Thursday here. And I am so grateful. I have somebody who I've gotten to meet this wonderful human in many different conferences all over the world. And he's somebody who has been inspiring me as an activist, an educator, a woman, a mom, a person who wants to make the world a better place. And of course, first and foremost, a Bitcoiner. This is John Dennehy, the founder of Me Premier Bitcoin. Welcome, brother.
Welcome. I'm a father, not a mom, but yes.
Well, yeah.
Yes.
But hey, so how's that going, dude? Like, I remember it's like you've been on this, it's this gradual journey of fatherhood and parenthood, and you go from 0 to 1. It's like, whoa, right? Like, how's it been going?
Oh man, wonderfully exhausting.
Yeah. I know it's like you're living this like liminal world, where you're sort of in between asleep and awake stage. And it's such it's a weird experience, and it's like you wouldn't trade it for anything on planet Earth,
Yeah.
but it's also like, wow, I didn't realize that I could really be stretched this far
Oh
out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like it has taught me so much, right? Like if you not that I ever before I had a kid, I thought that I understood life in the world and like my own limitations, but I definitely understand them at a different level now.
Right. And so, how has it changed your perspective, obviously, with your mission using, doing open source education and your first diploma, Me Premier Bitcoin? How has it changed your perspective with your mission now being a father? You know?
Yeah. It it has made me it's done like two contrary things, right? It's made me understand the value of what we're doing at a much deeper level because it's much more tangible now, right? Now it's not just for someone,
Hmm.
it's for this person,
Yeah.
right? Uh, Simultaneous to that, it we have a finite amount of time and energy, and now I have less of that to work on this thing, which I now realize is more important. So
Yeah.
it forces you to really prioritize and just cut away all of the fat, right? It's is this how important is this? Like, where is this on my priority list? And if it's not super high on that priority list, then sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not happening. Well, how about let's give the audience a little overview. I mean, I'm sure most everybody, in my audience knows who you are, but just in case we've got some new folks, um, I'd love for people to understand who you are, how you got to form Me Premier Bitcoin, and what does Me Premier Bitcoin do?
Yeah. So I'm John Dennehy, from New York originally. I moved here. I moved to El Salvador, which is where I currently am, in August of 2021.
Mm,
So if we remember, Bitcoin became legal tender here in El Salvador in September of 2021. So it was already announced, but it hadn't been implemented yet. So I moved here in that interim period because it just, as somebody who cared about the future direction of the world and cared about Bitcoin, I just recognized that El Salvador would be really important, like that it would punch above its weight, right? Like that there would be this small country, but because it was the first one to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender, it would set a lot of precedents. And I wanted to make sure that they were positive precedents. So I came here and I founded my first Bitcoin, which is a Bitcoin education nonprofit. And we believe that introductory Bitcoin education is the most powerful tool to put humanity on a better path toward a better future, toward a future which we have agency over our own lives. We get to define our own destiny. Like it's a gateway drug to freedom. Basically, it's a gateway drug to
yeah.
sovereignty. Like once you learn that you can control your money, you learn that you can control your power and have influence over your own future. Um, and that has tremendous second order effects, right? And and what better place to do it? What better place to get that started than the first country in the world to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender? So that's we've been I think very successful since then. We've taught here in El Salvador, we've taught 40,000 students in person. And we
In
have,
person,
yeah,
40,000 people.
yeah,
Okay, everybody who's listening, I want you guys to just get that in your head. Okay, we're not talking about doing a webinar and everybody got to hit their Zoom button and watch. 40,000 people in person, hands on, with human beings in front of you, helping you understand what Bitcoin is. Like, I just want you guys to get your head around this. This is why John is one of my, they always say don't have heroes. Well, John's one of my heroes. So I don't live by everybody's, quotes, but you're one of my heroes, John. Like, this is incredible. And I know, obviously, and I know you're about to say, well, it wasn't just me, it was my team. And I know it was, because you've got like the best volunteers and the best educators and the best people who have aligned their time, treasure, and talent to move this mission forward. And so I understand, it has been a monumental group effort, but just think about that, you guys. 40,000 people in the last 3 years in person. Okay, that's just, I can't. It's 11:11 here too, where I'm at, so that must mean we need to make a wish. Yay! Uh, but like, I love you so much. I mean, that's huge, John. I just want to say thank you. And okay, keep going. I just wanted to make sure that everybody got the magnitude of what that number means.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you said a lot of things, and thank you for anticipating that. Uh, yeah, we do have a great team, and that's what it's all about, right? Like, it's not one person with a good idea that is outside the bounds of what's traditional and accepted the status quo is kind of just a crazy person, right? But a team could really do a lot of.
Your team of crazy people are so much better than just one crazy person.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. And it's a lot less lonely too.
So much more fun.
Yeah, it's more fun, a lot of benefits. Um, but in fact, I I really do, occasionally I'll have to take a walk around and be like, "Wow, 40,000." But it's actually more impressive than that, because that 40,000 is just in person in El Salvador.
Yeah.
We've also, because it's open source, everything that we do is open source. It's a core value that we have.
Can you help people understand, in case they are listening and don't know what open source means?
Right. So actually, open source is a software term, and it just means that you it means that the software is able to be used by anybody without permission. The term for books, which is what we create, is Creative Commons, but open source is just like a more well known term. It's the same thing, that all the materials that we create, anybody in the world is free to use them however they like. There are no restrictions, no charge, no need to ask for permission, and that has led to some really incredible things. Actually, I think one of the most amazing things about the project is that we have grown by giving away our power and our authority.
Yeah.
Right, like in the traditional world, in the fiat world, we think of always trying to consolidate our power, our position, our authority, and we've taken the opposite approach.
Yep.
Everything that we do, we try to push out away from us rather than hold on to it. And that has led to some really wonderful things. So here in El Salvador, because it's open source, the Ministry of Education has adopted their version of one of our flagship products, which is the Bitcoin diploma. Got it right here. It's a 10-week program, basically from 0 to 1. It's
Yay.
financial education for the Bitcoiner. So it's financial literacy, and first financial literacy, then Bitcoin education. And we've helped to train 500 public school teachers, and I don't know how many they've taught at this time. So that's many thousands more. That is not included in that 40,000. 40,000 is direct.
Yeah. Like
Indirect, we actually don't know the numbers, but it's probably about a 10x.
10x. Okay. Okay. Okay.
And
Everybody just, again, pause. 10x. That's 400,000 people using free and open source education. That is this monumentally new thing. I think it's new because, like you said, we're living in the walled garden mentality of IP, and you got to license everything, whether it's music, whether it's a book, whether it's a course, blah, 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 And so everybody who's listening, what I want you guys to really get, and this is why Bitcoin is so important. This is why Nostr is so important. This is why understanding what open source education and open source development is so important. It's like, if you're on a mission to create freedom, go up, love go up, peace go up, prosperity go up, unity and community go up. It's not going to happen when you're dealing with these walled gardens, and so you, John, are just exemplifying that, and obviously you're taking this all over the world. It's not just in El Salvador. And so um, I can't say enough how important this is. And it's really inspired me with what I do and what I teach to be like, everything's value for value. Take it, just pay what you think it's worth. And, if you want to adapt it and do something, great, fine. Like, this is my little seed of how I've created something, but that's like obviously how the code works in Bitcoin and whatnot. So, yeah. So I just, it's so important what you're doing. I'm so glad I finally get to do an interview with you, dude. It's been like, I know we talked about it 20 times and I'm like, yeah, it's happening. Okay, so keep going. So keep talking about like how this is spreading outside of El Salvador.
Yeah, so we're coming up on 2 years. It was March of 2023. We created the infrastructure for what we call an independent Bitcoin educators node network.
Mm-hmm.
And these are people that are teaching Bitcoin in their own communities, using very often, or maybe even exclusively, at least in part, using materials that we've created here in El Salvador. And it's again, you don't need to be part of the network to use these materials as open source. The idea is just that we're stronger together, right? We're more
Yeah.
than the sum of our parts, and we collaborate with each other and we strengthen each other. Uh, and it's created a community. So there are some core values that everybody has to agree to join the network, and that is that the education must be independent, impartial, community-led, Bitcoin only, quality, and focus on empowerment.
Yeah.
And then at this point, the network is self-governing and decentralized. Again, we've pushed it out. We don't control it anymore. We got it started, but now we're just another node in the network. And at this point, actually behind me, I don't know if you can see on the map, probably can't see well, and I got to update it too. It's probably about 2 months behind, but all the colored countries are countries that we're active in there, and the U.S. map are states where we're active.
So
So
cool.
the node network has about 60 nodes in 34, 35 countries at this point. So
Wow.
we're adding, like, just this month, I think we're going to add 4 new countries. So every month is a block. We learn a lot from Bitcoin. We try to take what Bitcoin has taught us from the digital realm and apply it to the physical realm.
Yeah.
So all of these 60 plus projects are all teaching about Bitcoin in their own communities and in their own way, right? They might tweak some things to make it more relevant to their local context, but the numbers of students from this network are not included in that 40,000, right? Also not
Right.
included are online students, because we've also, over the past year, we've built an LMS, a learning management system, to try to facilitate um, online education for all the stuff that we do, and we're still early on that trajectory. Um, I anticipate that this year, 2025, we're is going to be when it's really going to start to pick up. These online classrooms that we're creating.
Totally. Well, it's so cool you just mentioned that because, and I don't, this is not private, but, so I've been working on some online education stuff just for my personal growth stuff, my 11x love code. And I wanted to build it over on Noster,
Yeah,
because ideally I want, of course I want it to be value for value, but I also want the students to be able to zap each other when they're doing something really cool,
yeah,
right? It's kind of like, oh, look, you did like a 5-day login, or you did your streak, or you accomplished your homework, or whatever it is, but just teaching people who aren't necessarily in my world, in, this particular business is, how to use Bitcoin, to like have some fun instead of just going, yay, and so it's kind of a cool thing. But there's somebody, um, Austin, who's created a website called Pleb Devs, and he's building it over using Nostr. And so it's like an LMS with community, with the courses, with the video and stuff. So it could be, so he's putting together a grant for OpenSats, and
Mhm.
yeah, I hope he gets it. And I'm hoping that like all of us who've got our own unique content, because he's teaching people about how to be a Bitcoin developer. And, so it's like Me Premier Bitcoin might be a great,
Yeah.
plug-in for that particular tool, And so I know obviously we've got Plan B, we've got me, we've got all of us doing our educational thing. So I think it's fun to think about like how can we disrupt the LMS world, which is literally it's a $214 billion a year industry with a CAGR of 24%. Online education is massive. It's going to be $1.2 trillion by 2030, especially when you gamify stuff. So especially when people have got companies that they're like, oh, I got to do remote training for my workers. Well, it's like, well, why not do it on Nostr? Why not teach people about Bitcoin at the same time? You know what I mean? And so it's like such a cool, I think it's like peanut butter and chocolate. I always say, uh, you know, I'm like, let's do that sly roundabout way of teaching everybody about Bitcoin. So anyway, okay. So all the good online stuff and the nodes. So I was, watching a quick interview, it was just like a quick 3-minute thing this morning about like the Treasure Academy, and they were talking about how they're doing a lot of stuff over in Africa, and you need to have local educators who understand storytelling through the lens of what it's like for the user, because you can't, like, somebody here in Colorado is going to have a different way of learning Bitcoin than they are in, you know Lithuania or Nigeria or Thailand. And so it's
Yep.
very important to like, how do you help make sure that not, and again, I know it's open source, like, and obviously when people become part of the node network, like what's been the, transformation that the teachers and the educators have been able to experience and feel more empowered, because they're part of the node network versus just like, I'm going to go do a meetup on Tuesday and teach Bitcoin.
Yeah, so we try to, it's a good question. We try to kind of strike a middle ground, because we live in a centralized world, and
Yep.
we are so used to that. It has been a really enlightening journey to really try to build this decentralized network, because there's a lot of people, maybe without even realizing it, are just so used to living in a centralized world. Like there's a bit of a shock sometimes, right? It's like they'll say that they support it and be like, okay, great. So now we're in. What do we do? And it's like, well, that's kind of up to you, right?
Yeah. It's just like, wait, hold on. You're not going to tell me step by step what my life is supposed to be, and I get to plug my umbilical cord into you, and you're going to tell me how to live? Uh-oh, what? What's that? What does
Yeah,
that mean?
yeah. So we wanna create these frameworks and this infrastructure that connects people.
Yeah,
So it's not just a bunch of silos, right? So it's not
yeah,
just a bunch of, that this meet up in place X and this class in place Y, like that these are connected, that they're part of the same movement. Yet simultaneously, we don't want to just direct it all to one central place, right? So it's this constant. We're constantly trying to find that space in between, where we could create the frameworks without dictating to individuals. And I think that it's tough, right? We're learning as we go. Um, but yeah, it's been surprising that, and as you said, there's kind of like this emerging set of different global networks that do similar things. But I think one of the things that differentiates the network that we're trying to build is how much we care about decentralization, like how much we push people out. So there was a early on, then many of the projects, so it's a split. Some projects are well established, and Bitcoin education is kind of like one component of what they do, but they do lots of other things. So a good example could be Bitcoin Academy in South Africa. They
hmm
do a ton of stuff. They're already super well established. Bitcoin education is one of the things that they do. So we work with them. They're part of the Node network, and hopefully we could make the lift a little bit easier on that one specific thing. But then there are other projects, so it doesn't really apply to a project like that. But then there are other projects who are more education, like kind of education only, and are just starting out. And many of them early on wanted to use the name and brand in, my first Bitcoin, me premier Bitcoin, whatever it is in their local language, with the location. And we thought about that. We actually took a step back and we thought long and hard about that. And one of the few, like, we try not to dictate a lot of things, but that was one of the stronger opinions that we had, or not even opinion, like we just said, don't do this. Um, Come up with your own name. We don't want everything to point back to my first Bitcoin and me premier Bitcoin. We consciously are avoiding these centralizing efforts. Not efforts, but there's gravity that we're just so used to things moving to this central point, that you often have to, like, if left to its own devices, that's what naturally happens. Not because that's the way of the world, because that's the world that we've all grown up in. This is a learned behavior. Um, so yeah, that's one example of how we have made a conscious effort to avoid centralization.
And how are you guys funded? Like, how are you guys getting all like, I've got this up on the screen here with the geyser. If you guys wanna donate, you can donate to me, Premier Bitcoin, and go to myfirstbitcoin.io. Uh, how are you guys, are you getting grants? Like, if you're working with the schools and you're teaching these 500 school teachers, like, how are you funded, in that realm in addition to expansion?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's it's the community for the most part that funds us. So historically, and this is all on our website under the finances tab, 57% of all of our funding has come from you, has
Mm,
come from the community. So that's grassroots, that's Geyser, that's people that, also on that same page or on Geyser are the two primary ways that money comes in. And then the second biggest category is grants, and that category is growing. In the first year or two, we didn't get any grants, and now we currently receive a grant from HRF, so the Human Rights Foundation, Block, um,
yay,
as well as OpenSats. These are current
amazing.
grants that we're getting.
Okay, look at right here. So explain this. So, and this is going to be a perfect dovetail into our next part of the conversation. Explain why you take no money from any government, please.
Well, we've never taken money from a government, and we never will. And the reason why we do that, and also that's why we have had corporate sponsors, although that is trending down. Last year, it made up 1% of all of our funding was from corporate sponsors.
Hmm.
Um, and who knows, it might actually be zero this year. We'll see. But
Oops, I lost you, John. He will bounce back here, guys, soon. Seems like we've had two disconnects today with Andre and John. Um, yeah, I think this is interesting. I'll wait till he jumps back on, guys. But like, obviously, when you take money from corporate sponsors or governments, then you have a little bit more strings attached to what and how you operate as a nonprofit. I ran a nonprofit, started a nonprofit years ago. Let's get you back on. Yay, you're there.
okay.
Cool,
Damn
cool.
the censorship.
Yeah. No. Um, but yeah,
Damn.
go ahead. So we were talking about why it's you choose not to take money from a government.
Yeah, it's to be independent, right?
Yeah.
Because on a long enough timeline, Bitcoin education will be captured by whoever funds it. That is, I strongly believe that.
Yeah.
So that is why we want to be funded either no strings attached grants or by you, by the community. If we're going to be captured, and I don't think it's a question of if, but by who, then we want to be captured by the community. That's who we want to be held accountable by. That's who we want to work for, not for that. That's how we align our interests, right?
Mhm.
Because if we took money from a government, there would be a lot more self censorship.
Yep.
We would be worried about upsetting that relationship more than would be healthy for
Yeah.
what we're doing. That's a really good segue into, I think, what is the next point. But I want to underline why that independence is so important very quickly, and that is Bitcoin is our best tool to show people that they could have agency in their own lives.
Yeah.
And that is corrupted if you don't teach people how to think, but if you teach people what to think, right? We come from a world where education teaches you what to think, not how to think.
Right.
And if our incentives are misaligned and primarily through funding, that's like the primary attack vector for this,
Yep.
uh, then we would frankly be incentivized to tell people what to think
Yep.
rather than how to think and to think independently to make their own choices. It's not something that you would notice. It's subtle, but super impactful on a long timeline.
It is, and I love that you guys are doing this because obviously what we're seeing, up here in the States is this dismantling of the US aid,
Mhm.
and God knows what, is gonna get revealed there, and we keep seeing things, every hour, some new like, "Oh, did you know that cats get stressed out, and if you don't take them to the spa, they're gonna shed more?" I'm like, "What?" Who fucking cares, like why would my taxpayer $1 go to a study like that? So just silly nonsense stuff, and then obviously all the other, just the programming that comes along with any government funding, and so that it comes in a very uh dark and malicious way, and unfortunately people don't see it, and they think like, oh, it's all this good equal stuff and whatever. It's kind of like you're not getting neutral information, and when we don't have access to neutral information, especially if we're somebody who is tired, we're overworked, we're overwhelmed, we're exhausted, we're feeling broke, we're feeling lonely, we're feeling disconnected, and it's like once we get some uh, little tidbits of information that sort of validate this, that, or the other, like we're much more easily manipulatable,
Yeah.
and so right now, unfortunately, as we all know, most people are like living like this with their nose just above water. They're treading water. They're hoping they're going to get to the next paycheck. They're hoping that, oh gosh, I hope I can get a birthday present for my kid this week, instead of like, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to have lunch 5 days a week at the office because I want to go get my kid his Lego set, and so most people are struggling to survive in all of the countries. I don't think, there's, obviously there's certain countries where we have a lot more privilege and opportunity than, developing countries, but it's hard out there. And I think the fiat system has created um, that drowning mechanism for everybody. And it just keeps us just enough so that we can kind of get by, but we're not going to rebel because we're too tired to rebel. So let's talk about El Salvador. with our with our next part here in the IMF, and let's talk about the your experience, and obviously uh, you were posting pictures of getting arrested previously in your past life about being a protester. Can you talk about that, and then let's talk about how that ties into what's going on today and what the solutions are that we might be looking at to help everybody.
Yeah. So I I became interested in Bitcoin. My Bitcoin journey, I could date it to 2001, 2002, right? Like pre
Pre
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. Oh wow. Okay. Cool.
And that is when I mean, it's a longer story, but like September, I'm from New York, September 11th kind of shook me awake. I was 19 years old.
Yeah.
It shook me awake, made me take a step back and look at the world and try to, determine what was wrong with it in order to see how we could do better and prevent things like that from happening again. Um, and one of the first things that I identified, and it's something that has really shaped my life ever since, is the concentration of power and that a small opaque elite could dictate the terms of the world for the rest of us. And there is no better representation of that than the IMF, right? So the IMF from a pretty early age was something that I saw as a symbol of what was wrong with the status quo, with the existing order. So I went in the spring meetings 2002 for the IMF. I went to Washington D.C. to throw my body against the machine, and I there's a picture. I mean, it was actually in the papers the next day, which is how I got the picture. But yeah, I got arrested. Um, and yeah, somebody snapped a picture like while they were rounding me up, while they were like putting the cuffs on me. So and that's like something to be, for me. It I always think back to the start of the journey, right? And the IMF is just as bad now as it was then. It's not like they've gotten better, right? But that was what helped me understand the value of Bitcoin when I did hear about it for the first time. It helped me connect the dots that Bitcoin was. I spent a lot of time when I was 19, 20, 21, whatever, in those ages, pushing against what I thought was wrong with the world. I like to say trying to slow the bad, and Bitcoin
Mm.
helped me realize that we could try to speed the good instead of trying to
Ooh,
slow.
dude, okay, hold on. Slow the bad and speed the good. You know I'm gonna be quoting this, so I love it. Wow. And then, of course, as Bitcoiners, we love, thinking about time preference, so that's really interesting. So, okay, keep going. I'm so excited.
um, yeah, so the IMF in many ways represents to me what's the problem, and Bitcoin in many ways represents the solution.
Let's
Uh,
tell so again, like, for folks who may not understand what the IMF's role is and how they operate, and we look at, Alex Gladstein and John Perkins and all the folks who we, admire and are doing great work, in addition to you, of course, like, can you help people understand, like, what the IMF does in a nutshell, and then why is this not a great thing? Why is this the problem, not the solution?
yeah. So the IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, is a international lending institution. We could think of it as the bank for nation states, right? If a nation state wants to get a loan, then that's primarily who they go to. I mean, China will also in development, and that's
No.
has its whole other set of things wrong with that. But the IMF is mostly represents the interests of the United States and the West. So it's effectively controlled by whoever funds it. Same with education, same with everything, really.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah,
That's why.
and that's why you don't take money from governments, because you don't wanna be controlled by the purse strings of whoever happens to be in office that day.
Yeah, yeah. So I think many people think of the IMF as just that, as a lender to nation states. If that were true, that would be fine, right? Like, sure, let's have a bank for nation states. That is not the primary purpose of the IMF. The primary purpose, that is the means to the end. But what the end is control. What the
Yep.
end is power. What the end is dictating to nation states around the world how they should exist, how they should behave, what laws they should have, how they have to fit into the world order, right? So the loans that the IMF gives have very long and often hidden strings attached. Never does it's not about it's not a business like where they're loaning out money and they get a return. There's some interest and they're making money and it's a business like how we think of banks. That is not how the IMF works.
Right.
Um, they use that money, and again, part of it is there's not really other options. If a nation state needs a few $1 billion for infrastructure projects, like there's not a lot of options for that, and the IMF knows that, right? So they get to set the terms, and literally they set the terms. This is not something, and this is something that I think a lot of people misunderstand with what's happening with El Salvador now. This is not something that two equal parties sit down at the table, and if there's a disagreement, then they're going to hash it out. That is not how the IMF works. The IMF controls and dictates everything. Once you enter into an agreement with them, you are, in a very real sense, you are no longer sovereign.
Yeah, you're
The
in the you're in a like a loan shark agreement with the mafia.
Basically,
And you're gonna
yeah,
get your
don't think of
knees
it
chopped
like a
off if
bank.
you don't do
Think
what
of
they
it like
say.
a contract with the mafia.
Yeah. It's a mess. Okay, so like pulling this up, right? And so the judge, the IMF is the judge, the jury, the executioner, what you've written here.
Yeah.
Um, and like something here that really struck out to me when I saw this a bit ago, in addition to today when you were posting, for the public sector, engagement in Bitcoin related economic activities and transactions and purchase of Bitcoin will be confined. That's a nice word. What does that mean? Um, and so that's another one of those ambiguous, confined to what, according to whom, how long, when, what, etc. And so I know a lot of people who are, you know, again, so for those of you guys listening, President Bukele, everybody was so excited because he made Bitcoin legal tender a couple of years ago, and it was just like, yeah, El Salvador is going to be this, fuck the IMF, let's get out of these things, and we're going to be sovereign, and once and for all, we're going to be like the little guy wins, yay! And then just recently, there was a deal that was made, and people are like, what? And so, of course, some of us are just like, haha, maybe he's going to take the IMF money and just go buy some more Bitcoin or go do some mining. And isn't this great? Yeah, go, President Bukele. And so there's a lot of misunderstanding about um, the magnitude of that deal and what the implications could be. And I think, so for those of us who are, of course, hopeful, and I know you were in El Salvador, so you're like someone who's like, I want to see El Salvador win, not just because you live there, but because you're, like a freedom warrior. Like, tell us, like, what's going on with you and the organization. And obviously, a bunch of people, like, what happened? Like, why did he change? Does anybody know? Is he talking about it? Is it public knowledge? Like, I'm just curious because I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah. Um, so to answer a question that you asked, like who gets to determine, whether it's confined? It's the
Mhm.
IMF. It is not you. It is not me. It is not El Salvador. None of us even have a seat at the table. This is not a discussion. The IMF decides. So vague terminology like that is especially dangerous.
Yeah.
And that is something that I think a lot of people don't understand. This isn't something like you could argue your way out of it. Like this isn't up to anybody but the IMF whether the terms are being abided by, which is a lot of their power, right? If it was how it seems a lot of people seem to think of it, where it's like the two parties are on equal footing, then it's like, okay, well, maybe the IMF isn't that bad, and need a loan. That is not how the IMF operates, though. The
Mm-mm.
two parties are not on equal footing.
No.
And then, you asked like why, like what changed, or are they talking about it? And we don't know because they aren't talking about it, right? We could make guesses and assumptions. I mean, almost certainly it's to just speed up infrastructure development, to build more roads and bridges and to do it faster. Also, probably to service some old debt, but it's basically all the typical reasons why a country would take a loan from the IMF are very likely why El Salvador is doing that. But the government has done a very poor job in communicating its motivations. In fact, so as part of a draft agreement with the IMF, that was negotiated and announced in December. So the way that the IMF works is step one is that the two parties, so the country and the IMF, will come up with a draft agreement. And in order for the agreement to go into effect and become official, to move out of draft and move toward final agreement,
Mhm.
then the nation state will have to um, oblige a number of conditions, right? So it's not the conditions that the nation state doesn't meet the conditions during the terms of the loan; they have to meet it before the loan even begins. So El Salvador is now in that process of conforming to the draft agreement. And as part of that, last Wednesday, so 8 days ago, uh, the president sent a revision of the Bitcoin law that was passed in 2021, which made Bitcoin legal tender, and made some pretty significant changes to that, to the point that Bitcoin is no longer legal tender. The government is literally so this isn't this language isn't in the new in the law revision, but this is the language of the draft agreement. The government is explicitly prohibited from accepting Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right?
That was a weird one to me, and because I get the, like, okay, you're not, you know, okay, let's take it out of legal tender status, which whatever, let people be voluntary, fine, we're not gonna push this, but, like, you can't accept Bitcoin as a payment, and so now you're gonna force people if they do have Bitcoin, they have to sell it just I don't get that. That just seems I mean, I get it from the IMF's lens, of
Yeah,
course, but it's just one of those I don't know. It's disappointing. And I'm just sort of like, are we playing 5, 6, 7, 8, 9D chess or something that I'm not seeing over here as little Val the pleb? Like, is there going to be some some grand play that we didn't or a move that we didn't predict as, citizens or people who really care and want to make a difference? Like, do you predict that that's going to happen, or do you think this is going to be another clamping down of the IMF just being like, "Nope, sorry, you got too far away from the this little narrative that we want you to be living there, little El Salvador. Fuck off. Like,
yeah,
we're clamping down on you."
yeah. So there's one of two scenarios which seem plausible to me. And effectively, I'm going to say yes, El Salvador is playing chess, and no, El Salvador is not playing chess. And actually, the preferred one for us as Bitcoiners is that they're not playing chess. Because if they are playing chess, I think it's actually bad for Bitcoin. Because if they are playing chess and they knew this was going to be the outcome all along, then that means this was just a card to play, a
Mm.
distraction. So when they did need to make a deal, then they had something to give up rather than something that they cared about more. What I think probably happened is this is just an L for them, right? And it's just spin to say that they're playing chess. Um, a country doesn't agree to the terms of an IMF loan and give up some of their sovereignty because they want to,
Yeah.
right? Because they're in control of the situation. If
Yeah.
they're in control of the situation, you don't arrive at this point.
Right. You don't need the IMF. You're like, "I don't
Yeah.
need you. I'm good."
And again, the way that the IMF is structured is so that once you enter their arena, they make the rules, right? They make the rules and they interpret them and they enforce them and they like there is no playing chess, right? Like once you enter the arena, that's it. It's game over. The IMF won. They're getting what they want.
It's like Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never leave, Um, it's really it's a bummer, and I don't know. My hope in my heart is that there is some weird little card that they're gonna play at some point. I don't know, and obviously we've got a lot of really very big name people, as you know who they are, and I'm not gonna say who they are. Um, it's kind of like, "Well, what's going on, dudes? Give us some intel, like, why is this happening?" And, like, all like cheerleaders, like,
Yep.
yay, El Salvador is the first country, and then now it's going backwards. So, like, is there
Yeah,
something we could have done to help as Bitcoiners? Is there just something that we're completely missing?
and I wanna push back on the or not push back, but I wanna, give one more scenario that El Salvador is playing chess. I would still be upset about that. They're playing chess and it's to the benefit of Bitcoin, right? I would still be upset about that because what that says is that we are changing from small, opaque, elite group A that is making decisions for the rest of us to small, elite, opaque group B that is making decisions for the rest of us. If
Yeah,
they're doing something and they can't tell us what it is, but we just have to trust them because they know better,
right.
then we have not fixed anything. All we're doing is changing who is in charge, but keeping the apparatus intact. So there is
Meet
no
the
way
new
to,
boss,
yeah,
same as the
yeah,
old boss, right?
right.
From
Like,
The Who.
is that
Um,
what we're rooting for? To
yeah,
have a different person control us, a different person dictate the terms of our life and our future?
no,
Like, that's not what the problem is. It's not the problem isn't who is at the top. The problem is that there is a top.
yeah. And well, and what I see too in the last, like, 48 hours, and maybe it's a little longer, I don't know, but just this, uh, "Oh, hey, we'll take your prisoners." Uh No, fuck that. Like, sorry, even maybe Bill Gates. You can put Bill Gates in El Salvador prisoners, thanks. But, like, can you imagine if Ross Ulbricht had to go to an El Salvador prison? Like, what would have happened to his mother and visitation? And
Yeah,
that to me, no, that's, I get it. Let's go save some money and offshore some stuff. No, you don't physically offshore your prison population. And um, as somebody who sat, and you obviously got arrested, I don't know if you had to go sit in a jail cell and get bailed out. I did once, and I did a little rant on it a few nights ago. Um, it's not the place you want to be.
yeah,
It's not a place you want to be, and you don't want to be in a place where you don't have family or anybody to be able to come support you and visit you. It's very, very un-American to do that. And again, as much as I'm like, let's go penny pinch and save some money, yay. Let's be efficient, yay. That's not the way to do this particular thing. So,
yeah.
uh,
I don't know if you believe in coincidences, but the at around the same time that El Salvador was repealing Bitcoin as legal tender, so there were two legal tenders, the US dollar and Bitcoin.
okay.
Uh, at the same time that they were repealing Bitcoin as legal tender, they were also accepting Tether
Oh,
to
right. Yes. Let's go into Tether talk. Let's talk about that. That was one thing I'm clueless about. Let's
with
talk about Tether.
which is, is a way to one of the things that it does is it spreads the US dollar around the world.
Mhm.
Um, and also, El Salvador is talking about taking US prisoners. So El Salvador went from seemingly a place that stood in opposition to the US empire to its best friend.
Totally. Oh, and let's
Like,
have Tether have our
that,
our
right?
headquarters of Tether here and headquarters of Rumble or whatever they're doing. Like, I'm still like, I don't understand stable coins that much because I haven't had to use them. I haven't had a use case. But when people try to explain them to me, I'm like, okay, I guess I can see why a stable coin could be an interesting unit of account for you to have instead of holding your, you know, Argentinian peso or whatever it is, that's like going up and down every 14 seconds. And so that makes sense to me. But again, it's propping up the dollar, and it's centralized and it's not audited. And is it going to be something that, this centralized, authority with the CEO can go, oops, you don't get to go spend your Tether today because you use too many carbon credits or whatever the nonsense is that we have with our CBDC conversations. And so is
It's
that something that is,
it's the CBDC with better marketing.
yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I'm everyone's so excited about it. And I'm like, my spidey senses are off over here. And again, I'm still I'm a noob, I'm a pleb, I'm always learning, and I don't feel like I feel like there's some slick marketing going on. And
Right.
maybe am I wrong? Am I being,
No.
what do you call it? Conspiracy girl? Are my spidey senses on?
Yeah. So there's, to maybe try to be devil's advocate, mostly against myself here. There are good things about Tether. There are good things about stablecoins, but that doesn't mean we should ignore the bad things.
Yeah,
And the bad things for me are that I got into this in the first place to replace the US empire, to replace the dollar empire. And Tether extends it, Tether strengthens it.
yeah,
Tether gives a way for that to reach into places that it's not already. Um, so on the micro level, like for an individual, I think it's mostly good, right? It's mostly an individual that uses it mostly sees benefits. If they're in Argentina rather than using the peso, for example. But on the macro long term level, if the problem is if the U.S. empire and U.S. dollar empire is part of the problem, then Tether is also part of the problem.
yeah. And I still like I don't even understand like how the amount of money they make each quarter. Where are they getting that? They're all the spreads, whatever. I don't get that. Like, how the heck are they making that much money?
Well, it's mostly from the interest rates, right? So they have a ton of money. They have like 140 billion dollars, and they buy treasuries with that. And the treasuries, especially in the last couple of years, the interest rate has been very high, right? Like say 5% or something. So if you have $100 billion and you're getting 5% interest on that, just on interest, you're making $5 billion a year,
That's
right?
insane.
Nothing else. You don't do anything with that. It's just interest. And there's I think there are probably other ways that they make money as well, but just to hold your money, they're making billions and billions of dollars.
It's insane. Again, for all of us who are still learning and who are new and want to be cautious and not be like, oh, this is so great. Look at the shiny object over here, because it's easy, especially when you get rah, 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 and you get these rich people who've got mega budgets to go tell you how great their thing is,
Yeah,
and,
right.
and why it's a tool for freedom, and then all of a sudden we see this thing happen with this beautiful country. And then all of a sudden things are getting kind of uh, rug pulled to some degree, and so I'm very cautious, and it's like I don't want to be
Yep.
me, look at me, I'm fucking sparkly, I want everything to be pretty and beautiful and work, but I don't believe that that's the way that things unfortunately operate, um
Yeah. So like if you look at Bitfinex and Tether, which are they have the same parent company, Bitfinex makes a good chunk of their money from trading shitcoins,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then Tether makes a good chunk of their money from propping up the US dollar system. These are two things that I would think that the average Bitcoiner would oppose each of them individually,
yeah,
but yet we kind of give it a pass because they've thrown a bunch of money at other things that we like.
yeah. Well, and I think that's like that. I forget who I was speaking to yesterday, but uh uh, you know in a typical narcissistic abusive relationship. Okay. You have somebody who, will love you and adore you and give you all the things you want and prop you up. And then they will like smack you around and call you names. And then they'll, put a little wound salve on and make it better. And then you guys won't talk about it for a while and everything's going to be okay. And then they're going to love you a little bit and do all the good stuff. But then they're going to fuck you again and hurt you. And if you don't do what they want, there's like a power struggle there. And I was looking at what's been going on with our, in the United States here with Trump, it's like, oh look, you freed Ross, yay, and oops, you're gonna go fucking take over Gaza, what? And just like, what the fuck are you talking about? And so like, and it's like, yay, you're auditing things, and let's get transparency. Okay, cool. And then who knows what else is going on, but it's just this like, it's literally like the job of an abusive narcissistic person is to destabilize you, And so I look at the way that things are happening in this world, on a macro and a micro level, globally, and certainly, inner with each countries. It's like we're navigating that, and so it's like when people don't know what the fuck is going to happen in the next 15 minutes, it's like, oh my God, I got to see what's going on Twitter. What the heck, instead of like going and being productive and doing the thing you're supposed to go do, And so unfortunately, I think we're dealing with uh, that archetype, you know, uh, in our power structure. So it's very, I don't know. I guess it's always like DYOR and buyer beware. Like, don't trust these things, guys, and don't get too, enamored by the hype, and do some research, and don't be afraid to reach out to people and just like, am I crazy? Is this really the thing? And that's why, John, when all this stuff started going on last week, I was like, it's time. I need you on the show. We got to talk about this thing. What's going on in El Salvador? And I mean, obviously, I've always want to talk about Me Premier Bitcoin and what you do, but I know that you're obviously with your posts and everything, like you have a lot different, uh, you have a different perspective that I really honor and trust. And I will always do my research on you, John. But
And
um,
to draw to an earlier point, and then I actually have to start to
yeah, totally. I know we got to wrap.
but but this is the benefit of not taking money from sources that will influence you,
Yeah.
right? Like, imagine we were taking money from the government. Would I be saying these things? I would
Nope.
not. I would
Nope. Mm-mm.
and like, to be, I don't want to be too anti El Salvador. This is a great country. There's a lot of hope, great people, a lot of good progress, but this is a loss. This is an L, and we need to admit that. We need
Yeah.
to accept that. That's how we're going to move on. We're going to learn from this and do better. Not we're going to double down and just pretend like everything's perfect.
Right. La la
This
la
is
la
what
la.
we're going
Yeah.
to go along, right?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't help. If we were funded by the government, I probably wouldn't say that.
Totally. And I think that's what's so important, again, about the ethos of what you guys do at Me Premier, and the ethos of many Bitcoiners, and the ethos of all of us. Like, I don't have sponsors for my show. I do everything just because I love it and it's my passion, and I want to like learn and meet people and get your stories out there, and it's like, if I had a the strings attached, I would also have some tape attached to my lips, and I'm not interested in that. And so I think, and again, and I love, like, El Salvador is incredible. Like, I got to go there twice, and it was like, wow, people here really have a sense of hope, and I call it hope in action, and people are doing things, and it's not just a bunch of, philosophy around it. And so you're going to have lots and lots of hiccups and bumps in the roads when you're having a revolution. It's not
Yeah,
going to be like, oh, look, here's our magic fairy dust. Everything's great.
yeah, yeah. There's gonna be bumps in the road. There's gonna be setbacks. Like,
Yeah.
that's fine,
Yeah.
but we're not gonna learn from it if we pretend like it's didn't happen.
Right. It's like, no, no, yeah, exactly. And so I think the more open, honest dialogues that all of us can have, whether we're here in the States or down there in El Salvador, is like, uh, that's why open source is cool, because you can say, cool, this is what we learned from. This is what happened. Anytime I do an event, it's like, here's what happened. Here's what went well. Here's what didn't. What can we do better next time? It's progression 101, right? And so hopefully that, this beautiful revolution of freedom called Bitcoin can continue to have that mindset and feel there's no egos here. Like, it's not about, nobody has the right answer of like how to change a country and turn it into a Bitcoin standard. So I hope and
Yeah,
pray that President Bukele and his team and all of the teams around the world, we've obviously got Maya and Suriname, and, these people who are trying to make changes. It's like, okay, let's use my mistakes as an example for your
yeah.
thing going forward. All right. So, and I know it's time. So let's tell everybody can go to myfirstbitcoin.io. You guys can go support, make donations. You can learn, make sure you follow John and My First Bitcoin on X, and under with Jay Dennehy writes. I'll have all this stuff in the show notes for you guys. So any last words of wisdom for anybody who's out there who maybe is scared to learn about Bitcoin? To give them a little, like, because you said introductory Bitcoin education is the most important thing.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody should. I mean, I guess there's a fear of the unknown, right? Which is
Yeah,
why a lot of people maybe are reluctant to accept Bitcoin. Um, the devil sort of thing. But there's no downside to learning about Bitcoin. There's
yeah.
only upside. There is zero downside to that. It can change your life in ways that go far beyond the money that you spend. It's a different way to view power. And again, this is what I firmly believe the real revolution is, which is, I kind of touched on earlier about like the playing chess comment. Um, this revolution is not about changing who is in power. It is about changing our relationship to power.
Hmm.
Bitcoin is our best tool to understand that and to get started on that journey.
Love it. Thank you so much. It's so true. I know a lot of people we are programmed in this old power paradigm, and we
Yeah.
don't realize like, wow, we can be the ones in power. And
Yeah.
it can be pretty intimidating sometimes when people say, "Oh, be your own bank." And they're like, I want to call customer service. I want them to be my bank. And if I lose my password, like, so it is a big leap for people, especially when you're talking about finances. We're not just talking about, oops, I lost a Google document. It's like, no, it's ability to survive. And so there's a different thing there. But once you start connecting the dots of why, like, you don't want someone else in control of that, you start to realize like, oh, wow, this is way better. It does take a few minutes of proof of work to make it solid and safe, but it's worth it in the long run so that you don't have the fluctuations of a government or an institute or policies making changes. And then all of a sudden you're getting a 6102 and they confiscated your life savings.
Yeah. I would argue that that responsibility aspect is a feature, not a bug, right?
Yeah.
Because we also are used to living in a world where we don't have to hold ourselves accountable,
Yeah.
where we don't have to take responsibility.
Yep.
And in Bitcoin, you do, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, if you make a mistake, you should feel some pain for it.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't mean that as like a masochist or something, right?
No,
But
no, no. It's just kind of like, yeah, it's
that's
radical
how we learn.
self-responsibility. It's like at Burning Man. You don't
Yeah.
get to just show up and there's a bunch of vendors. Like, you bring everything in, you're responsible for your survival, And so there's a lot of parallels with Burning Man and Bitcoin, in my opinion.
Mistakes are opportunities to learn,
Yeah.
right? But we have to be willing to one admit when we make a mistake,
Yeah.
um, and not insulate ourselves from the consequences, or push that off onto somebody else. Like, oh, I don't understand what's happening, but somebody else does, so
Yeah.
everything's probably okay.
Yeah. They'll fix it for me or somebody
Yeah,
else. Yeah. And it's a mindset shift for sure. Like, as you go, and what I always share with folks, it's like you don't have to eat the whole burrito in one bite. Do
yeah,
tiny little bites, one bite at a time. Make sure you've chewed it and swallowed it before you take the next bite so you don't choke. And so it's just very important, I think, for folks to like don't get overwhelmed. The Bitcoin community, obviously, what you, John, and all of your amazing team, Raina and everybody, like, you guys have completely made it so approachable and easy for people to come in and learn and in a just a step by step methodical way too, which I think is super important because you go to different places and you're just like, who am I supposed to watch? What do I do? What do I do first? What do I do next? How do I know that this is legit and it's not just some company trying to scam me with their coin? Like, you've made this completely neutral, and it's the bomb. And so I love you, and I love what Me Premier Bitcoin has done. I can't wait to see you somewhere. Where are you? Do you got it? What are you going to be doing? Any traveling? Any conferences?
yeah. Just as I guess my closing thought, because I'm late to another meeting already.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, sorry. Go. Oh, shit.
No, closing April is a big month for us. So April 10th is the next Independent Bitcoin Educators on conference.
Cool.
Will be in Nashville at Bitcoin Park. That's
Yes.
during their grassroots week.
Cool.
So come to Bitcoin Park for the whole week, and this will be one of the days. It's awesome. And then April 23rd, back here in El Salvador, we're going to have a graduation, a Bitcoin diploma graduation in the morning, which are like really inspiring events. And then in the evening, have a charity dinner and an auction to fundraise so we could keep doing this work.
Awesome, dude. Well, anything tag me on anything so I can repost and help if you guys need fundraising things. And you know, my small but mighty audience is noble and wants to help. Yay. Awesome, brother. Thanks for tuning in. And sorry I made you late for your next meeting. God bless everyone who's tuned in. And again, go check out myfirstbitcoin.io and we'll catch you guys on the other side. All
Thank
right.
you so
Thanks,
much.
John. You're the best.